What's up everyone, I'm Dave Mech and welcome to another video. And in this video I'm going to dive deep into this beautiful looking mixer by Union Audio called Elara 6. And a beauty it really is. And it's probably the best looking mixer I've ever had in the studio. Of course it's very subjective, but damn, it's really cool looking mixer. Union Audio lent me this mixer to test it out, and I'm gonna cover all the features, give you a whole bunch of sound examples to listen to the filters that it has to offer, the whole EQ section, and also going to cover a whole bunch of interesting tricks that you can do with this mixer. Alright, build quality. So, in terms of build quality, we have a very high quality mixer here, and I'm just going to say it. This is the best built mixer that I've had in the studio ever, hands down. I did quite a lot of mixer reviews, and I also used a lot of Pioneer in my life and stuff, Pioneer mixers, but this build quality is on another level. Everything feels very tight, sturdy, durable, pretty insane. Let's start with the knobs, for instance. These are not rubber-coated plastic knobs. They are metal or aluminum with a nice grip. Very nice. Some of these metal knobs are smooth, but these have a nice grip to them. And the way the resistance feels is really nice. So that it also differs per section, per parameter even. So these are quite quick. They have a nice resistance to them, so you can set it precisely, but you can also quickly turn it up or down. The frequency, for instance, the filter cutoff feels a bit more smooth, like these big volume knobs on old amps. And then there's this width knob, has more resistance to it, for example. Then we have the faders. These, in terms of resistance, they sit nicely between the 92, the zone 92 and the zone 96. 92 was very loose, the 96 was sort of this very durable resistance feeling, which made it a bit more difficult to do sort of volume cuts. The 92 was too loose for me, so if you wanted to, set it to halfway through in a live situation very quickly, it sometimes would shoot up. Too loose for my taste. And this sits nicely in between, so you can do volume cuts, but you can also set it precisely somewhere where you want to. Then the crossfader is very loose for your vinyl scratch DJs. And we have these switches, which are nice, or zone quality kind of. And these buttons you probably know from the Model 1 and 1.4 mixers. Yeah, that's basically it. We have the inputs and outputs, also high quality. The top panel is a matte finish, sort of prone to greasy fingers, but it's also very easy to clean. And how this top panel feels also very different. I've never had a mixer that has this sort of durable feeling to it. It's everything is high quality about this mixer. Just wanted to point that out. As you can see, the fader section, it's sort of a separate panel, and you can actually unscrew this, take this out, and exchange it with this rotary fader option. You can also order the mixer already with this installed or with the linear fader installed, but you can also order this module or the other module, whatever you start with, separately and switch between them whenever you want. At the back of the mixer we have our mic 1 and mic 2 inputs for the return channels that you can switch between line and mic. We have our aux send 1 and aux send 2 and our return 1 and return 2 channels, which are all balanced jacks. Then we have our regular RCA inputs. The top row, RIA input, so this is for vinyl. And the bottom row is 4 channels of line inputs. And then we have a booth out. Then we have the mix 1 output. We have the mix 2 output, balanced jacks. So here we have our master insert, which I'm really happy about that they added this. Then we have our record out, which is very nice in combination with the signal processing. This means I can just add a recorder and have the complete recording, including the master insert, which is wonderful. And of course, not to forget our on and off switch and our ground for the vinyls. All right, let's go over the main channel section. The main channel section consists of a 4-band EQ, which you are probably very familiar with from any zone mixer. In general, if you really look at the front panel, it really has shares some resemblance to the Zone 92 and the 96, for instance. And the reason is fairly obvious, because the designer behind Union Audio is Andy Rigby-Jones, which is the legendary DJ mixer designer that designed a whole bunch of zone mixers, including the one that I love the most, the DB4. He also designed the Model 1 in close collaboration with Richie Houghton, and he also designed the Zone 92, of course. And he now has Union Audio, where he creates these very high-end mixers, tube mixers, rotary mixers with super high-quality components and stuff. It's pretty incredible. And this is the sort of the second mixer that is really aimed towards the sort of the zone crowd, I'd say, the techno DJ, basically. And you can really see that. 2 return channels, 2 stereo sends, 4-band EQ, it's all there, right? It's fairly obvious. 2 main filters, but there's quite some interesting differences here that we'll go over. Starting with the main channels. So we got 2 stereo sends. So I can send a channel out of the mixer to an external processor, and the output of that processor can come back to any channel, but mainly you would be using the return channels for that. I'll get back to that a little bit later. And we have a pre and post fader option. So if I press this, it will be pre-fader, which means if the fader is down, I can still send this to anything, a monitor, but also to an FX processor. If I unpress this, or if it's up, it's post fader, and then the fader has influence over how loud it's going to the processor. So if I turn this up and then throw the fader up, it will send it to that FX processor temporarily. I'll get into this a little bit later when I talk about the return channels. Then we have a switch, which can switch between RIA and line, which is vinyl or line, right? Trim, knob, which you can adjust how loud a signal comes in. It can go quite loud, right? And we have 4-band EQ. And the cool thing about this 4-band EQ, it's again different in setup compared to the Zone 96 and the 92, for instance. So for the Zone 92, this was 2.7 kilohertz and 270 hertz. For the Zone 96, it goes 1.1 kilohertz on the high mid and 350 hertz on the low mid. And for the Elara 6, it is 250 hertz on the low mid and 1.5 kilohertz on the high mid. So that's pretty interesting. And the high shelf and the low shelf are also very different. Whereas with the 96, for instance, the cut slope was fairly steep, and the boost as well. And they were sort of apart, and these overlap with each other, and the slope is very gentle. So that gives a very different feel. There's no better, there's just a difference, and whatever has your preferences is the thing that you will like. For my live set, currently I'm really enjoying these. So let's do a sound example. So high cut, it's minus 20 dB. Or plus 6 dB. And then we have the 1.5 kilohertz. And 6 dB boost. Very useful. And then we have the 250 hertz. And 20 dB cut, 6 dB boost, and low shelf. So it's definitely not an isolator, it's fairly gentle, but it cuts enough. And boost starts to clip a little bit, so it's just as an example. Very nice. So you can hear that it's not an isolator, it's not a complete cut. They chose for this very musical, gentle slope. And I'm really enjoying this, how it mixes between two signals, for instance. And let me show you. I'll give an example. So we have these two tracks, or grooves rather. I'm gonna mix this in. Slowly going to increase the bass on this and cut this. Very musical. So for the mid section as well, I can sort of cut this, for instance. Very smooth sounding. I don't know how else to put it, but it feels very musical, natural. Things blend very nicely. Basically any setting that sort of compensates for the cut of the other. So a boost here and a cut there. It all sort of blends very nicely. I really like it. So they chose, again, new frequencies for this mid section. Of course, related to the difference in high shelf with a smoother, more gentle slope, they also changed the way, the focus points of these mid frequencies. A good thing to know, if I cut everything, again, these are not isolators, so you're not completely cutting everything. Everything down is -20, there's still going to be some signal, right? It's kind of good to know. Okay, so let's talk about the analog processing. The analog processing strips have a very unique setup compared to the zone mixers. Zone mixers also had these two strips, filter strips, with obviously a filter. So this filter is switchable between high pass and low pass. There's no band pass, just high pass and low pass filter. And to me, it sounds quite different than compared to the zone filter. It's personal preference. I don't know what would be better, but I can just say that I really like the sound, and let's have a listen. So we'll start with the high pass filter. So I'm going to route this channel to Y. I'm going to turn on the analog processing. So you can already hear the resonance has influence over this. And I should probably mention this. If you are somebody that wants to have this turned on the whole time, and a lot of the people that use the 92 mixer did this, there's a zero detection circuit in here. I will get into that a little bit later as well. But if you want sort of the neutral sound, this is what I think is the resonance should be at if you want sort of a neutral kind of switch between the original signal and this turned on, basically aiming the resonance to the E of resonance. You can hear this. I'm going to just turn it on and off. Fairly neutral. All right. Now let's do the sweep. Now, if you like to have some more oomph in the low end, maybe where you play you need a little bit more oomph. If you set this to 0 and then boost the resonance, let me turn off the hi-hat here. Put it like this and set the resonance to the max. So it adds a bit more like low end. If you're just on headphones, this might be slightly more difficult to listen here than when you have a full fledged monitoring system. Let's switch between the two. Very nice. Now do a sweep. You can see here it starts to clip. So generally you would turn this down here and then turn it up again, for instance. Turn it up as you go higher. Very nice sounding filter, I think. Okay, let's go for the high pass, the low pass filter rather. Very nice sounding filter, I think. If we go to the left side of the resonance, it becomes more gentle. So I'm going to set this to 0, and you can really hear the difference when I set it to high pass filter and the frequency knob to 0. Turn it on, so you can hear the low end go away a little bit. You have a track that's way too bass heavy. This might also be an option to gently roll off some of the low end a little bit. So let's get into the width and the drive especially. So it's a very interesting feature. I'm going to turn on this nice pad, which is there's a lot of width to it, so this will be very obvious. Set this to high pass filter. And let's first set this to mono. So now you can hear that this track turned to mono. And we can inverse it. So now left and right is right. Right is left, left is right. And then make it more wide. This becomes especially more noticeable when I increase the reverb. So this is normal. I'm going to increase this. It's actually pretty cool because it's nice to have this sort of build up this way. And back to normal stereo field. This is one of those things that I also explain in my courses and also in my one-to-one sessions, is that you can create contrast this way, from very wide to normal stereo, or from very wide to mono. stereo field that way. Very interesting. I kind of like it. It's a very unique feature that it opens up different ways of thinking again to create build-ups in a live situation. So again, for live, this is a very nice feature actually. I really like it. Let's move on to the drive, which is also very nice. So let's increase the drive so you can hear it's going to be very subtle until it's not. And you can see this sidechain blink whenever it's compensating for the volume loss. So this is very clean. This adds a little bit of drive. With the width. Just to exaggerate it a little bit so you get an idea of the range. And you can also hear that routing wise the crunch is before the filler, which is nice because that we can actually add some crunch, right? A lot of crunch. Like so. Even boosting the low ends to create more crunch. And then cut the low end. Do a nice noisy filter sweep. So I'm exaggerating it, of course, so you get an idea of how crunchy it can get. But the point being that you can create contrast like this. So wide to normal stereo field or even mono, very crunchy to very clean. Very cool to create some very interesting build-ups. For me, this is very nice because I do have some crunchy grooves. This is a fairly clean groove that I have going now. But I also have some crunchy grooves, and it's nice to sort of exaggerate that crunchiness in a break and then go back to that normal crunchiness to create sort of this contrast in that way. Very interesting. I really like it. And when we start feedback looping, this also becomes very interesting, this drive. We'll get to that. So to me, setting this in the middle somewhere, just before it starts to break up, turning it down a little bit back, you have a nice little, this is very clean. A hint of crunch, a little bit more width to it, a bit more oomph. See what I mean? It's almost subtly compressing it a little bit, just gently but nicely. I really like it. And then having this width control to make the mix a bit wider, a bit more oomph in the subs. Awesome. All right, so the return channels. I've got this microcosm here, which is a very cool effect. I really like it. And we're going to play a little bit with these return channels and see what you get in terms of response on the EQ section and what we can do in terms of feedback loops. And just a disclaimer, if you're going to play with feedback loops, be very, very careful because things can become super, super loud very fast. And it can hurt your system, it can hurt your ears, so you need to be careful with this. But if you do it right, you can create some very, very cool soundscapes and gnarly, interesting textures, so to speak. If you do this keep your hand on the fader so you can quickly turn it down or ride the fader to ride that edge of where it's going to feedback and where it's backing down again, right? So without further ado, let's go. So this effect is very beautiful. It creates these very ethereal sort of soundscapes out of thin air almost. I really like it. And I'm gonna send this channel to sync 1. It's also being synced, clocked by this syntax. So, now currently it's not set to pre-fader. So I'm going to set it to pre-fader, and I'm going to close this so we get an idea of what the sound effects sound like. So very bass heavy, right? There's a lot of... And this thing doesn't have a high pass filter, only a low pass filter. So we can use this low shelf to get rid of some of the low frequencies. So some resonances we might want to take care of by cutting using the parametric EQ. And if I set the gain all the way to the left, so this is symmetrical plus minus 15 dB, and you can get this nice phasey kind of effect. Or boosted. And this is going to be very essential in the feedback loop thing, because we can sort of boost a certain frequency range that's going to be fed back into itself with different types of effects. So it's very musical, very instrument-like, you could say. So I'm going to set this to the middle, and I'm going to start with the EQ, the high EQ now. Boost. Cut. It's fairly gentle. Also symmetrical plus minus 15 dB cut and boost. And the low. So cut, mid section. Give you an idea. So if I don't cut this, if I set the midsection, get this huge build-up around 100 Hertz or so. If I then cut this, now we get a nice sub-boost. You can hear that, very low rumble, but no build-up on that 100 Hertz range. 150. Huh? Very nice. Now, we can also send this to an analog processing strip and fader. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna cut the low frequencies a little bit because in general I don't want to, get into a fight with whatever here is going on here. So I'm gonna turn on strip and I can filter this now. So it's routed to the X side. can crunch it. I can make it even wider than it already is. See what happens? Normal stereo. Even wider. And I just want to point out that I did a test where I monify the signal while it's at its widest setting. It doesn't phase cancellation is not really happening, which is very cool. So there's definitely some interesting thing going on, like I explained before. So it's a very nice way of I think you're basically just boosting the sides rather than there's no Haas effect going on or anything, right? We're not delaying the left or the right channel, we're just boosting the side channel. Therefore, it still modifies like it should. You can create this very wide, and then if I crunch this, but now let's try and see what we can do when we send this. Right, if this sent to the analog processing, to the effect unit, comes back into the return channel, goes to the analog processing, and now I'm going to send this out again to this and back again. It's going to be coming back again here and then going through the analog processing and again through the effects block. So we're going to create a feedback loop, and this is where we need to be very careful. So I'm going to make sure that I lower this and play with see, there it becomes very loud, so you need to be careful. This is where I'm riding the fader. I'm making sure that it never goes too far. Okay, that is feedback, yeah? So now let's change how I'm boosting, which frequency band I'm boosting, frequency range I'm boosting, yeah? So I'm gonna set this quite low and do the same thing. That type of feedback. If I set this to the middle, different, higher, different again. So you can see how much you can get out of this. You're crunching it if you want. Of course, you can use the low pass filter to get rid of that very high crunch to make it a bit more gentle. See? So, just thought I wanted to show you that because that's really the thing that amazes me about this mixer. So much fun. So, that is the return channel, but using the analog processor to create this feedback loop, and that combination of things is just very cool. And I'm definitely going to use this in live situations, because you can create these awesome deep soundscapes. So if I mix the Digitone 2 here in, I can just create this thing from the channel that's not even audible. I send this to the effects processor and do some interesting feedback loop stuff. fader curves are a thing that many threads on the internet are talking about. I mean, it's one of those things that it's super personal what kind of fader curve you like, what your preference is. And so Zone 92 and Zone 96, gives you an option between logarithmic, linear, and exponential. I think the 92 is linear, as far as I know. And the Model 1 is exponential-ish, right? It's all ish. A lot of people don't really like the exponential curve because it may seem like the first 80% or so of the fader feels kind of useless a little bit. And then at the end, suddenly the difference is very big. And yeah, there's an up and down side for this because it's, you need to watch my Model 1.4 video really for me to explain why it can actually be quite useful and musical. For this mixer, we have a different kind of curve. I have no idea really because the manual doesn't say what kind of curve it is. But I suspect it's linear. So you can hear quite a bit of drop here. So if it was exponential, you would expect this fader to get louder real quick here. If it's logarithmic, you will expect the fader to become quite loud quite fast here, and then sort of not do anything, not that much anymore. And here you can hear it's quite smooth all the way through. So to me this sounds quite linear. Maybe to my ears. Maybe there's a little bit of an extra boost at the end. I'm not entirely sure. It could also be just how our hearing works. So I just wanted to mention that and really give you an idea of the fader curve. I like it because you can really smoothly, sort of gently get a track. Then we have the crossfader, which is also quite important, of course. So groove, right? I'm going to set this to Y section. I'm going to set it to cut. So you can hear that on the left side it's cut, and as soon as I go probably like 3 millimeters or something, that's about half a centimeter, between 4 millimeters, something like that. There needs to be a little room, of course, for it to be really cut. And then so works quite nice. I'm not a scratcher, so I don't know how good this is. I mean, most people will use Innovator, but zone mixers were always easy to rebuild the Innovator into it, and I'm quite sure that Union Audio is aware of the essential, how essential it is for this to cut very steeply, right? Is that a word? Steeply? Anyway, I can set it to off so it doesn't do anything. That's nice. And we can set it to mix, and now it blends nicely between two tracks. Oh, they're both set at Y. That's not really helpful. Yeah, let's turn off the analog processors. Okay, so another small section. We're gonna talk about master insert. So the Elara 6 has a master insert, meaning that before it goes to the main output on the back of the mixer, main outputs, plural, you can route it through an analog processing unit or units and then back into the signal path, and then it will go to the output. Very, very useful because that way you can monitor the metering, you get the metering post processing, right? So that's actually very useful. So on the back we have the record out. That means that we can also use the record out, which includes the analog processing, right? So that's also quite essential. All right, things you need to know. So I've yet to see a product that is completely flawless, and flawless is also quite subjective because some flaws can be used as an advantage. Some flaws are deal breakers. Some, flaws are just meh. So this is really up to you. This is why the section is called Things You Need to Know. I'm not here to judge anything because this is a fully analog mixer. It has a certain signal path. It has some tricks up its sleeve, like zero crossing circuits that have upsides, like not having an audible click, but also potentially have some downsides in the way they are working. So the first thing that I want to touch upon is the zero crossing circuit. I'm going to route this groove to the Y analog processor, and I'm going to heavily high-pass filter that to make this very obvious. So I can turn it on and off. No click. That's perfect. But for this to work, it needs to detect where a zero crossing is. And there needs to be a little bit of a threshold around that zero crossing area. I'm going to turn this channel down. I'm going to now turn this on, high-pass filtered, and slowly increase this. So we can hear no high-pass filter. And there it kicks in. See? So you need to be aware of this. There's a fix though, and it works both ways. So if I have this on, right, like so, and I turn it off while the fader is down, you can hear high-pass filtered signal. And there, it suddenly goes off. There's a sort of a workaround to this. The same thing happens on the Model 1 and 1.4. There were people saying that they really wanted a smooth way of blending in a high-pass filter or low-pass filtered signal. If I want to bring this in high-pass filtered, I will turn this on and quickly do this. That's it. And now it's high-pass filtered. And the other way around, I'm gonna turn this off. And now it's not. So you only need to do a very quick fader throw like this. And if you do it rhythmically on the beat, for instance, or on the off beat, then nobody will notice, right? I can demonstrate this. Bring it in. You don't even need to go to the max. So if you just set it, sweep, do a quick throw halfway through, you're already there, right? So down, high-pass filter on. That's it. Then the second thing you need to know is that there is some signal bleed when you route any of the channels to the analog processing units. So let me just demonstrate that. I'm gonna turn this on. I'm gonna turn this on. I'm gonna filter this away completely. And you can still hear quite some signal. Wow. This is completely filtered away, right? And the other way around with a low-pass filter, same thing. So I reached out to Andy asking about the reason that the signal bleeds through. It's about -40 dB, he says, and this is by design to eliminate any artifacts from switching the analog processing strips on and off. So the pre-analog processing signal is kept in there at about -40 dB to make sure that the switching process is as smooth as possible with the least amount of artifacts. So just for you to know that that is the reason. And this is based on his experience on the Zone 92, where a lot of people were complaining about the clicking noise when you engage the filter on and off. So the zero crossing detection plus having the original signal in there around the noise floor, those two things help minimize the artifacts from engaging and disengaging and switching a channel from one analog processing to another, or from its original signal to an analog processing strip. And I must say, it does indeed work. It's seamless. There's no clicking. I can switch and set this very distorted and this less distorted and switch between them, and there are no artifacts whatsoever. So just for you to know that if you encounter this, it's by design, and this is the reason why. Okay, so I'm going to do a little jam with the Digitone 2 that I have here, the Syntax that I have here, and the microcosm, and this mixer, of course. And I'm gonna just go nuts with blending and do some wacky stuff with the effects, creating some feedback loops, to just showcase the mixer a little bit and how things can become quite creative. So that's next up. Before we get into that, just want to mention, please subscribe to the channel to support and click the notification bell to be notified when a new video shows up, and like the video. If you enjoyed this, you got some information out of it that you liked and that was useful to you, don't forget to like it, because that really helps with the algorithm and stuff. Because yes, I do want to grow this channel, of course, and I want to keep creating these kinds of deep dives. I've got a bunch of gear here that I'm going to create deep dives of. So if you want to see more of that, make sure that you subscribe, like, notification bell, do it now. Let's jam.